What's going on, guys? Stefan here with you, S&E's Garage. Here we have a beautiful 2003 Toyota Avalon in for some routine maintenance, and we wanted to talk about it. So this Avalon is the pinnacle of Toyota reliability, durability, and dependability. This car was produced in the absolute prime of Toyota quality, and just by looking under the hood, you can tell that that is evident. This car has 260,000 miles on it. You heard that right. 260,000. It still has the original starter, which the owner pointed that out to me, which I thought was absolutely amazing. There is not a single oil leak under here. This valve cover is nice and clean. The block is clean, and you can just see just how well this car has stood the test of time. And this owner cares greatly about this car, and he wants to keep driving it. Believe it or not, it does have a check engine light on for a couple of emissions codes, but he's moving to Florida, and in Florida, they don't require any emissions testing, so he's not worried about the codes. They're evap codes. He just wants to go ahead and make sure that this thing is going to make the trip to Florida for him when he's ready to go, and that's what we're going to do here today. But let's just take a walk around this car and check it out. The paint still shows beautifully. These wheels are still in fantastic shape. They're not pitted. They're not peeling. And the car just looks, I don't want to say it's showroom ready, but just look at this thing. It's stupid clean for the age and the mileage. Now, this customer was referred to me by a friend because they know that I'm an expert at Toyotas, and he wanted to pick my brain a little bit on what he thinks I should do to the car for him, or what we should do to make sure that this thing is going to be ready to go for his trip to Florida and for the next couple of years, because he doesn't want to have to replace it yet. So there's a couple of things we're going to do. If you keep in mind, the car has 260,000 miles on it now. The last time this timing belt was replaced was at 183, so he's going to be due for a timing belt and a water pump. So we are going to be taking care of that today. We're going to be using the Aisin TKT024 timing kit. It's going to come with a belt, tensioner, all the gaskets, water pump, everything that you're going to need. Now, we're also going to be taking care of the spark plugs. To do these spark plugs, the upper intake plenum has to come out, unfortunately, or you can pull the cowl. I prefer to pull the intake manifold. So we have a set of upper and lower intake manifold gaskets. We have our spark plugs. And we're also going to go ahead and remove the lower intake manifold and replace the coolant crossover tube. That is actually a common failure point on this engine. As they get up in age and mileage, that hose gets brittle and they can break and literally cook the engine. So we're going to make sure that this thing is ready to go. And we're also going to be using some Toyota super long life coolant to fill it back up with. Now, we are also going to be replacing the accessory belts. They need to come off to do the timing belt, so it doesn't make sense not to. And we also purchased some cam and crank seals just in case they're leaking. If they're leaking, we're going to go ahead and replace them. If they're not leaking, we're not. Don't fix it if it ain't broken. So with that said, let's get this thing up in the air. Let's take a look underneath it. Let's see what a 260,000 mile Toyota Avalon looks like. Now, what we see underneath this Avalon is almost as impressive as what we see on top and under the hood. This engine and transmission, so the whole powertrain, is bone dry, and I mean bone dry. Let's go ahead and grab a flashlight here. So what you're going to see here, this is our transmission mount, original, in beautiful shape. These axles, also original, beautiful shape. This transmission is bone dry. The steering rack is bone dry. The exhaust is original to the car. And I just can't get over how clean this car is for having this kind of mileage on it. No rips in the axle boots or anything. That exhaust might actually be leaking a little bit out of that donut gasket. We'll have to start it and listen. But just walking under here, this is crazy how nice this Toyota has held up and stood the test of time and mileage, especially here in New Jersey. Now, the brakes look like they have recently been replaced, and they are actually in beautiful shape. They are like new. You can still see the crosshatch there in the rotors. Let's go ahead and check the front. Front brakes are also like new. This car is in fantastic shape. Now, for what it's worth, I did offer to buy this car off of this customer when he asked me if he thought it was worth putting, you know, money into an old car. And as soon as I told him I wanted to buy it, if he didn't, he made the decision to keep it, because he figured if I wanted to buy it and I'm a mechanic and I work on these, then I know something that he doesn't, which is right. And that is that this car with this engine and this transmission will quite literally run forever. This is probably what I would consider the third generation of the 1MZ. So it is variable valve timing. It's got the dual throttle body setup, and it has the EGR deleted. So it is super reliable, and it is built after they had the sludging issue on the early 1MZs. So this engine will not have that problem. And as long as you keep up on the maintenance, it will run forever. Let's lower it down. Let's take a peek on the inside, and then we're gonna go ahead and start working on the car. Now, this engine and this car is so old, and so many videos have been done on how to do timing belts on these, that I'm not gonna do a full tutorial on it like we usually do. I'm just gonna throw you on a time lapse, and I'll stop at certain points just to kind of show you what we're doing. But we're not gonna go step by step and, you know, keep pausing like we usually do. We're just gonna start, you know, rocking and rolling to get this done. So let's just lower it down, take a peek in the car, and then let's tear into it. So ignore the noise in the background. I'm currently draining the coolant. But let's just go ahead and just take a peek inside of this car and how nicely it's held up. He does have seat covers on it. And under the seat covers, the seats are, I don't want to say they're like new. They're a little worn, but for 260,000 miles, you know, what do you expect? The steering wheel shows that it's obviously been driven. But other than some normal wear and tear, this thing is in beautiful shape. Let's go ahead and open this back door here after we unlock it. He uses a windshield cover when he's not driving it, so the windshield doesn't get all, or the dashboard doesn't get all messed up. And like I said earlier, pride of ownership shows greatly with this car, with just how well it looks and honestly how well it runs. This thing runs great. We're going to start it up once we're done with our repairs, and we're going to take it for a ride just to show you, you know, kind of what the deal is with this thing. But let's turn the key on real quick and I'll show you the mileage. So like we said, 260,265 miles, which is absolutely amazing. So we went ahead and started draining the coolant. You're going to see it draining under there. We're going to throw you over there on the tripod, and we're just going to start wrenching down here. We're just going to start getting, you know, we're going to take the motor mounts out, timing cover off, we're going to take the drive belts off, and we're going to start digging in. All right, guys, so just to show you where we are at here, we got our timing covers off, upper and lower. We have the engine set on top, dead center. You'll see our timing marks here line up. Timing mark on the back cam lines up. So now we're going to go ahead and pull this bracket off here. This is like the motor mount bracket, more or less, and it covers the water pump. So I'm going to pull that off. That's going to give us access to the water pump, and it's going to let us be able to pull this belt off. So luckily for us, these cam seals are not leaking. So we went ahead and we kind of bypassed having to pull the inner timing cover. What I do is I pull the studs. There's one here and there's one here. I pull them out. You'll see them here in our box. It's these two guys here. So I'll pull them out, and then I'll take this bolt, and a bolt down there, so 3 in total, out of the inner timing cover, and you can snake the water pump out without having to remove the inner timing cover or the cam pulleys, which saves you some time. So that's the way we opted to do it. So now we're going to go ahead, we're going to clean up that mating surface for the water pump. We're going to slide our new water pump gasket in right here. It's metallized, or it's rubberized metal. It's got a little O-ring on it, so that's why I like to use the Aisin Toyota kit, because it comes with a good gasket. So we're just going to go ahead, clean that up, slide our gasket on, and then put on our water pump. All right, guys, so what we have here is our new belt installed. You'll see our timing mark here lines up on the front camshaft. If you can see down there, let me get a flashlight really quick, I'll show you. Our timing mark back here on that one lines up. I wish you could see it a little bit better, but you see it now, that's lined up. And then you'll see our timing mark here. You see our dot and our line on the belt coincide. And then our timing mark there, that little dot on the tone wheel is lining up with the notch in the block, along with these marks here lining up with their respective notch on the inner timing cover. So I wanted to wait to do this with you guys. We're gonna go ahead and do the honors here and pull the grenade pin for the tensioner. So now the tensioner is tensioned, and we're just gonna go ahead and rotate this engine over 2 times. We're gonna go 2 revolutions, stop at top dead center, and then we're gonna check our physical timing marks. Now, the lines on the belt are no longer going to line up, but the physical timing marks, so this dash with this notch, same on the back cam, and the timing mark I showed you on the crank should still line up. So what you're gonna see here is our timing cover is back on, our accessory belts are back on, and everything that has to do with the timing belt job, minus the engine mount, is completely done. You'll see we put our nice new reminder sticker there to remind the customer of when their next belt is due. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna start focusing on getting to the rear spark plugs. We did the front ones already. So we just went ahead and started disconnecting some wiring here. We just disconnected these wires, pulled them back. They're color coded, which is super helpful and super nice. Thank you, Toyota, for doing that. So the next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna go ahead and pull all the fluff here off of the intake. We're gonna pull the air box, the snorkel basically, and then we're gonna go ahead, disconnect as much as we can here. You can leave this whole assembly in. We're just gonna pull the vacuum lines that we absolutely need to, and then we're gonna go ahead and move the intake to the side and then switch over to the lower intake manifold. So what you're gonna see here is we got our back 3 spark plugs done. We did them before we pulled the lower manifold. That right there is the lower manifold. Here is the coolant crossover tube that we replaced. Here's the old one. You can see it's a little dingy here. It's a common failure point on these once they start getting up in age and mileage. So if you're in here doing anything, just go a little bit further and take care of it to avoid any problems. And here is the coolant system inlet. It's where your radiator cap goes. So now we're just gonna go ahead with some emery cloth. We got this stuff right here. There you go. And we're gonna clean up the mating surface on both the cylinder heads and on the plenum or the lower manifold. And then we're gonna go ahead and torque it to spec after we install our new gaskets. All right, guys, so we got this Avalon all finished up. You'll see our nice new timing belt sticker. It's got some nice fresh spark plugs, new intake gaskets, new coolant crossover tube, and just listen to this 260,000 mile Avalon idle. This is a cold start, and this thing literally idles like a Swiss watch. Just absolutely amazing how nice this thing rides, or idles. So let's go ahead, let's shut the hood and let's take it for a ride. So I have already driven this just to make sure that everything was okay before we recorded. And I'm absolutely, honestly amazed just at how well this car drives for having 260,000 miles on it. The transmission shifts nice and crisp. There's no lag in shifts or anything, and the car just drives great. And that just goes to show you, number one, how well these cars are made, and number two, how maintenance and taking care of your car can go a super long way, because this guy is the second owner of this car. He's owned it since it had rather low mileage on it, and he's never really had any major problems with it because he changes his fluids. It's got fresh trans fluid in it. It's got fresh power steering fluid in it. He keeps up with his maintenance, and maintenance on these cars, or any car for that matter, is key. Any Toyota, whether you maintain it or not, you know, will go 150, 200,000 miles. But to get it past that 200,000 mile mark, you need to be on top of your maintenance. And that's what this guy has done, and it's paid off in dividends. Just think of all the money this gentleman has saved on car payments and you know, various other expenses of buying a new car, interest on you know, a car note that he just hasn't had to pay. He's been able to put it in the bank, and it just, like I said, it pays off. Just take care of your car and it'll take care of you, especially if it's a Toyota. Now, we did have a small issue with this car that we had to fix. I don't know if I missed it before I started working on it, because I just kind of hopped in it, pulled it in the garage and started taking it apart, or if it was something that got disturbed from me removing the intake manifold. But we did have an extremely high idle when we first started the car, and it kind of threw me for a loop. Even after it was warm, it was idling at like 1800 RPMs, and I couldn't exactly figure out what was going on. These are a little bit before my time. So what I ended up having to do is taking the idle air control valve apart, and I had to clean it. I cleaned the heck out of it. I cleaned the throttle body, and I disconnected the battery. I let it sit for a couple hours, and then we just had to let it idle in drive. I had sat in the car with my foot on the brake for, 8-10 minutes and just let it relearn, and the idle eventually came down to right around 700-800 RPM, which is right where it's supposed to be. So I think we're good there. I did let the customer know that in the near future he may need an idle air control valve if for some reason it gets stuck again, but like I said, it definitely threw me for a loop, and I didn't want to have to tell my customer they had to spend another $400 because now it has a problem that it didn't have before. But sometimes that's just the way it goes when you pull something apart and start disturbing things and moving things around, especially on a car with this high of mileage. You're gonna have casualties like that. I did have to replace a couple of vacuum hoses that were cracked and brittle. As I was chasing this problem, trying to make sure I didn't have any vacuum leaks, I smoke tested it. I had no vacuum leaks after that point. So at that point, I knew my work was good, and I have to start looking in another direction to figure out what was going on. And we ended up, like I said, cleaning that idle air control valve, and she idled right down with absolutely no problems, which was a godsend, because the last thing I want to do is give, a customer bad news like that when they've already spent, a lot of money maintaining the car with me. The last thing I want to do is tell them, hey, something broke while I was doing this, and, it wasn't my fault, but I'm glad it didn't come to that. I'm glad, I didn't charge the guy to clean the throttle body. It was something that I had to figure out and fix before I gave him his car back. Now we're doing about 50 miles an hour in this thing right now, and I can't hear the engine. I hear a little bit of wind noise. That's normal. That is what it is. It's an old car. But the powertrain on this car is in fantastic shape. And by looking at the car, if you had told me that this had 100,000 miles on it, I'd believe you, because this thing is really in fantastic shape. So let's go ahead here. We're going to do a little acceleration here. I'm not going to beat on this guy's car. It's old. I don't want to break anything, but we'll give it a little gas. Let you hear the 1MZ. This is such a smooth engine. It's one of my favorite V6s Toyota makes, other than the 2GR. It's silky smooth. It's not a powerhouse, but it's so smooth that you can't even feel these things running when they're idling, and that says a lot. It's one, like I said, one of my favorite V6s that Toyota makes, and one of my favorite V6s on the market. There you have it, guys. This Avalon is ready for another, hopefully 100,000 miles, and hopefully we have another happy customer here. So like, share, subscribe. Let me know what you think about the car and the video in the comment section below, and we'll see you next time.